In this video, I want to look at one of the divides that I see coming up in my more Buddhist-oriented books. I'm listening to a Jack Kornfield book on Audible right now, but it came up listening to Michael Singer on Audible as well. Like, are you these bags of atoms? Are you these, are you this food? Are you these things you own, or are you something more? So it's the word "or" that I want to focus on. So the distinction in the great divide between the spiritual and the profane, the sacred and the mundane, and in a in a framework, in a paradigm of language, we're always taking the one and we're cutting it into pieces. And when you divide the one into two, the spiritual and the profane, you get two equal pieces. Whenever you create a polarity out of the one, you get two equal delusions. And they're delusions because there is no divide. And so cults or cultures tend to focus on one part of the probability field, one part of the individual, one part of the psyche. And then it's the job of healers, holers, people that are trying to restore the individual to wholeness. It's their job to emphasize the counterpoint, right? The cult emphasizes the point, and it's the job of the healers or holers, the ones that restore the wholeness, to emphasize the counterpoint. And it's the job of the cult to dissociate and separate us from all the other cults. You can't be in a cult and have a cult identity if you honor your connection with all human beings, with all life. It's the opposite of a cult. We are the ones that think this, that feel this, that say this, that do this, and do it in this way. We are like this. This is our identity, our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. We are not like you and your pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. We have a better pattern. In fact, our pattern is the best. Now, this flips a little bit in abuse cycles with the shame-based person. The shame-based person is the one abandoned by the group, the scapegoat, the one left to carry the innate pain of every system. So, that group is often feeling, I'm the worst, I'm the, this and that, the other, and they are the best. But you've still got the divide in there. And so as part of the re-emphasis, of parts of the identity, because whenever you form a pattern, you have the uninterrupted infinite possibility field, and then you inject a pattern. Now, before I draw this pattern, it could be anything. And so that's why identity, right? If it was everything, it would be nothing, right? Because the conscious mind cannot hold the complexity of everything, cannot be conscious of everything. It can only be conscious of one or two things in tension with one another that creates the consciousness through the symbolic language of words. Words are symbols that represent patterns. And so we can create this pattern. But in doing so, we also, in order to see this pattern clearly, we don't see this pattern or that pattern. And already it starts to look too chaotic. Where's the pattern in that, right? Because we have three patterns, right? And it's too much. And so the culture is trying to delete anomalies and create a recognizable pattern, and then work on the pattern, right? No pattern is perfect. No system is perfect. It all creates the phenomena of waste, which is an illusion, which is why you know you're dealing in a delusionary language, right? If you create a system, you refract the one into a pattern. In this case, we divide the 1 by 3. We have waste out here and out here and out here. And then we have an identity that's very clear in here, but you've got waste. And the more complex the pattern you put on it, right? Here you have 50% waste, right? The good guys and the bad guys. So you take your pick, but whatever you decide is the good guy, the opposite of that has to be the bad guy. I mean, that's just the way it works, right? And so you don't usually have that many people saying, I'm the bad guy and they're the good guy. But whenever you divide the one into two distinctions, that's what you end up with. So a binary system, a polarity with a paradigm of good and bad, means that there's 50% waste. It doesn't get that much better if you turn that into 3. You've still got waste all out here, right? This is the system, the sacred, the true, the good, all that. And then all this out here is waste. And if you turn it into 4, you start to see a little bit less waste. There's more volume inside than outside. And the more complex you make this circle, the less and symmetrical. The more complex and symmetrical the shape, the less waste is on the outside. But no matter how complex you make it, you can go all around like that, all around like that. You can make a 20-sided circle, and you have less and less waste as you do that. But there's always some waste, right? Because by the time you get to like a 200 million point system, you start to just see the circle, right? But it's still refracted into 200 million times. But ultimately, the only thing that has no waste is 1. 1, not divided, the ecological whole has no waste, and that's 1. It's infinitely complex, and it's 0. Right? There's no 1. Right? You're beyond all thought. See, you had no thought. You divided the 1 into language. You combined the language in a variety of ways, creating the dimension of thought, any number of thoughts. And you work within the system of thought to figure out what's the state of grace. How do we create the most amount of grace? And eventually it takes you back to 1, which eliminates thought, right? You're now on the other side. But teachers are all navigating in thought. They're all in the dimension of duality and language, cutting the world up into bits called words, and then rearranging those bits in different ways. And as the cult divides the world into us and them and says, we are this and we are that, a wholer or a healer, one that makes whole, has to go over on this side and emphasize these things, right? Because that's where the wholeness is, right? We've already got this side within the duality, within the paradigm. Now we have to go to the other side. And so highly materialistic cults, such as our own, well, we have to go in and create the counterpoint, which is highly inner thoughts, right? We are a highly inner cult, right? We're not just our possessions. But there is, in the focus on healing, in the focus on wholeness, there is, I think, an excessive exaggeration. So we'll hear people such as Michael Singer, Jack Kornfield, channeled, etc., saying, you are not your body. You are the consciousness. You are consciousness inside your body. You are a consciousness with a body. You are not your body. You are not your possessions. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. Feelings come up and you have feelings, but you are not your feelings. You are not your family. You have a family. You are not your role. You have a role. You play a role. You go to work and do this. You come into this lifetime, you do this. You have a role, but you are not your role. And so we might take the one, the undivided whole, and we divide it. And on this side, we have the cult saying, you are your thoughts, you are your body, you are your things. And on this side, you have the Buddhist-leaning teacher saying that you are not that, and that you are the consciousness that includes it, right? So there is then a clear illusion, a clear tension between the cult and the spiritual teacher, right? And the tension is, you need this to be a good person. You need to buy 7-Up, right, in order to get, to win that sports race. You are what you accomplish. You are what you do. You are what your word. Are you your, you are this, you are that. So we have the identification, and then we have the dissociation. Identify means that there's this pattern. It's flowing through my family. It's an intergenerational pattern, right? Every third, person in the family, one of them has to be the scapegoat. Most of those copy the tried and true method of drinking to numb the pain of being blamed for all the family's systemic problems, which are, of course, a microcosm of all the cults or culture's systemic problems. So they've got to drink. Then people have got to pretend to care, but they don't care too much because they don't want the person giving all the dysfunction back to everyone else in the family. Their job is to pretend that it's all their fault, right? It's all my fault. It's all my fault. You had an affair. It's all my fault. You broke the law. I wasn't a good enough partner, right? It's all my fault. And then everyone else, to tie in nicely with the pattern, has to say, yes, it's all your fault, right? I wouldn't have had an affair if it wasn't for you. If I wouldn't have broken the law, it's all your fault. Yes, it's all my fault. Yes, it's all your fault. You need those two to somewhat fit into the pattern. And so the ego identifies, clenches, right? So this is just a pattern, two people agreeing in a nice rhythm, it's all my fault, it's all your fault, it's all my fault, it's all your fault. It's a nice rhythm. But the ego identifies and says, I am this pattern. I am blah, 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 right? Whatever the pattern is in the family system. That's me. I am the one who does this and says this and thinks this. And if there is no ego, there's really not any conscious mind. There's no physical experience to speak of, at least for the ego, right? And so the transcendent voice is, you are not. No, you are not. I am. No, you're not. I am. No, you're not, right? So we have a nice little battle here between the I am and the you are not. I am my food. I am what I eat. No, you're not what you eat. Yes, I am. I am what I do, what I say, what I think, what I feel. So, that's a nice little polarity going on there. The question is that real, right? The you are not. And if we go back to the one, right? Go back to the one, it's always there, right? It's just the uninterrupted ecology that we never left, that we dissociated from in order to enter the domain of language, the domain of thought, the domain of polarity. You cannot have a language without distinctions. You cannot have distinctions without cuts, right? A distinction is a cut, distinct, right? We cut the one into pieces. Now, having cut the one into pieces, we can then rearrange and imagine different configurations, like a puzzle. We take the beautiful image, we cut it into 1,000 pieces, we scatter the pieces around, and then we try and put it back together again. But what are we looking for? We're looking for the one, right? The one image, the brain will connect the dots and say, oh, that's not just a little bit of blue with a stripe of orange. That's part of the cat's tail. Oh my goodness, right? But once you restore the one, right, and if it's certain types of puzzles, you can barely tell that it was cut, right? Once you restore the one, you just have the image, right? The synergy, all that is, the uninterrupted ecology that never left, right? Because we can cut the body into words, and we do it very nicely. We say, this is a nose. Is it? What's a nose? Well, it's this thing that's separate from this thing and this thing. It's on the face, which is separate from the chest. Really? How so? Well, we just decided that right at this groove point, it seems like the pattern is changing. And so we call that a nose, and we call this a face. Well, we decided that. Well, why not a Bose? Well, they call it a Bose in another language, but in our symbolic language, we say that this is a nose. It starts right about here. It's a little bit hard to determine exactly where it is, right? It comes along here. It always sticks out. From what? From the face. That's separate, right? Well, could you have a nose without a face? Could you have a face without a bone to hold the face? You know, it's a little bit tricky to, Michael Singer will say, like, you could cut off your arm and amputate it, and you're still there, right? You're not your body, right? Well, a little bit hard to cut the neck and still be there. But that's where Michael is going. You're not your body. And the question is, how can you return to wholeness? How can you return to one? What happens with all the things that you're not? Right? Like, if you're not the body, and you return to the wholeness, if you return to the healness, where does the body go, right? In other words, you cannot return to the one, to the wholeness, and have any waste. Waste is an illusion created by the mathematical equations of symbols, right? Like, we create a symbol called 5, and we divide 5 by 3. We get a remainder. We get 1, 3, and then we have a remainder of 2. And that's the waste. That's what doesn't fit into that equation. There is no remainder, though. There is no waste. There's no leftover energy. There's the whole, and then there's the bit left over. That's systemic thinking, right? That's, you divide the 1 into 3, and then you have this waste left over. But the 3 is an illusion, because there is no distinction between the nose and the face, between the face and the body, between the body and the planet, between the planet and the solar system. There's no distinction, right? We can use useful pattern recognizing technology to create the illusion of distinction. But if you destroy the planet, the idea that this hand is separate from the planet quickly dissolves, because all the things that were dependent in an interdependent relationship with the planet, they quickly dissolve too, right? So there is no waste. There's no leftovers. There's no not something, right? You can say, I am, it is, we are one. And it's not we are one except for consumer culture, like consumer culture is outside the one. Rape is outside the one. We are one, and rape is outside the one. We are one, and politicians and attorneys are outside of the one. The other political party, they're not one. We are one. They are outside the one. We're the good people, the chosen people, right? We're going to go up to heaven. But prostitutes who curry favor with showing more, that break up healthy marriages, they are going to go to hell, right? They're going, and the one is not going to connect, right? You see, God is not going to restore wholeness, is not going to heal the illusion. He's going to accentuate it. Right now, you're going around and just being judged by me, but later, once you are judged for your life, the world is going to be cut into two, and there'll be lakes of fire and lovely harps and all this up here. And it'll be divided, right? And God's going to create the ultimate divide for eternity. And I'm going to be on the good side. And you're going to be on the bad side. The bad, irreconcilable, unforgivable, burned alive for eternity by the holy, by the whole. How do we separate the whole for eternity from the paradigm of a wholer, from the paradigm of a healer? We don't, right? So what are we talking about? Well, we realize we haven't begun to touch anything transcendent or divine in that whole paradigm. We've just taken the delusionary pettiness of human beings and projected it onto a big screen and called it God, because we don't have the humility to imagine that anything out there could be more intelligent, more whole than we are, right? So we're not talking about healing. We're not talking about wholeness. We're talking about divide between the good thing to do and the bad thing, the healthy and the unhealthy, the whole and the unwhole, right? So it's important to understand that anything that's spoken or written, however poetic, is within the language of separation. And so then there's a direction, right? The best words can do is they can kind of point at a direction where words can't go. And the reason they can't go there is that they are the delusion of separation and the delusion of distinction. This is what words are. They're delusions of bits created out of the paradigm that this bit is separate from this bit, which it isn't. And so anyone, a poet gets to the edge because the words stop making sense, right? And so you have to take leaps, transcendent leaps of imagination. So poets get close to the edge of fragmented delusions, right? Teachers, right, that say we are all one. But who isn't we, right? We, Well, people, we are all one, but what about other things? So if you really get to the edge of language, you just say one is one. And that's all you can say. One is one. One is one. One is one, right? That's about as high up as you can get. And, we pretend that high is separate from low, but we're within the structure of our cult, in which high is better than low, right? That's why we invented top hats, so people could look taller, closer. First you have a short royal figure has to look taller, so they have to invent this awkward hat, and then everyone else wants to be higher as well. I want to be higher. I want to be lifted up to the heights and away from the depths. Right? Well, you can't have heights without depths, right? It's difficult. You can't have heights without depths. What's your contrast point? Like, if you are lifted from what? What are you lifted from? You're lifted to lifted, so that you can be lifted and lifted. Why use the word if it's all the same, right? If it's all one. So the best we can do is within the hierarchy, and so we're back to the delusion that the higher is separate from the lower and the higher is better than the lower, but within the hierarchy of higher consciousness, then you kind of wonder if a flower has the delusion that it is better than the root that made it, because it's higher, right? The flower, right? Does this iris think that it's better than the soil out of which it emerged, or different from the soil? Is the iris different from the soil that gave birth to it? It's not a very easy argument to make, but it's within human language that we're making all this. So if we are not our bodies, whose bodies are they, right? So what is the body? Is it an illusion? That's that's the message of some teachers. Is the body an illusion? If it's not an illusion, if energy exists, right? Well, we say that the physical plane, in spiritual talk, we say that the physical plane, like Plato will say that the physical plane is a mirror, an echo, a reflected image of the real dimension, like that there's a real world, and that the physical world is a reflection of the real world. It's not the real world, it's a reflection of the real world. And then we create language, and we say, no, language isn't real. That's a symbolic representation of the physical world. All right. So you can see where we're going there. We've got this seeming endless continuum where this is a reflection of that, and 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 this is a reflection of that. This is a symbol of that, that's a symbol of that, that's a symbol of that. And so the question is, if it's not real and it's not us, who is it? Is it, do all the, once people become spiritual, do all the bodies get piled up in a great pile and just vanish? Physics says that energy is not created or destroyed. It just changes from one thing to another. But the question is, since there tends to be a lot of fractal patterns in reality, so we see fractal patterns of a bit of sand, then that becomes a fractal pattern of a beach. So it would suggest that the quote higher self, like within some paradigms, the unconscious is the self that has all these lifetimes. The subconscious is the self that has the whole lifetime. The conscious mind is the self that has the bit that we're focusing on right now of reality. But then the subconscious holds the entire lifetime as its sphere of influence and focus. And then the unconscious mind holds all our lifetimes. And so the unconscious mind, it has this lifetime, it has that lifetime, it has this experience. Would Michael Singer talk to the unconscious mind and say, you're not this ego, you're not this self, you're not this body. That's just an illusion. That's a body you have. In other words, this person listening to the Michael Singer audiobook isn't real. It's just a face. So just, you're not that. You're the consciousness that has this lifetime. You know, you're the consciousness that dreamed that dream, but is not real. And then you go up another notch into the umbrella consciousness, following the fractal pattern, into the umbrella consciousness that has a soul among many souls. And then Michael Singer advises them, that soul down there that has all those lifetimes, it's not real. You have a soul among many souls. And each of those souls or each of those unconscious minds that we, call them, have all these lifetimes, but they're not real. It's not real. You are the one who is having that. Well, the question is there anything left at the end of this argument? Right? So you could say there are rings of the one. Right? So you take, you're not your things. They're not real. You're not your things, so you delete your things. You're not your thoughts. You're not your feelings. You're not your ideas or whatever. And you're not your body. And then you go to the next level and say, you're not that. You're not you, right? That's a you that you're wearing. That's that idea that, that Dane has, that he's him. That's just one of many performances, right? So that's not real. And then you delete that level because that's not real. So you end up with absolutely nothing, right? That's the end of that argument, is nothing is real. Well, nothing is unreal either, right? And so when you go whole, when you become whole, what if you go in the other direction and say, it's all? It all is. It is. That the healing is not from saying you are not your Porsche. You are not your Porsche, right? You're the consciousness. What if it wasn't an either or? What if it is you are your Porsche, you are your family, you are your thoughts, but you are also the witness that witnesses them. And you are also the witness that witnesses the one witnessing them. And you are also the witness of the witness of the witness that witnesses you having a Porsche. You are your things, you are your thoughts, but you are something more. You are your body, and you are something more. You are the present, and you are something more. You're also a body. You're also this. You're also the dream, right? In other words, when you introduce the distinction between what you are and what you are not, and then pursue what you are, you ultimately end up with nothing. Right? If you introduce the distinction between what you are and what you are not, and you are what you are, but you are not what you are not, you end up with nothing. Because everything is connected, right? Everything is connected. That's how we end up with everything. And within the paradigm, of course, of the egoic consciousness that is creating all of its thoughts in the paradigm of language by just combining. You know, we cut up these bits and say black and white. We combine black and white in different ways and get different pieces and sequence it and do all of this within the framework of time. As long as we look through these eyes, as long as we have the body, we will be aware of that part of us. But it doesn't stop us from being aware of other parts of us. They don't have to be better parts, right? The iris doesn't have to be better than the root. It is, with our point of view. Like, wouldn't you be so happy if I chose a background of roots and worms as the background there, brown and little bits of worms crawling through and iris roots? Who cares about the flowers? The roots are the important thing. They're the thing that grow the flowers. Without any roots, there's no irises. So don't you want to get to the heart of the matter? Don't you want to see what really matters? How soil and iris roots combine to make irises? See it happening, right? Little lumps of brown and this. That's where it all happens. The fertilizer of the world is fecal matter. That's what it really matters. That's the starting point of all life. Fecal matter enriches all this energy in the soil and grows all these various things. They couldn't exist. The starting point of all life, fecal matter, right? Wouldn't you like to see that? Oh, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that, right? So we have our identity, our eye pattern that says that I like seeing nice purple irises. I don't like photographs of poo. But without any poo, there's no irises, right? So it is important, even though we may prefer different bits in different contexts, it's important to understand that there is a link between what we say is spiritual and what we say is not spiritual, that there is a link between what we say is dog and that which we say is human, that there's a link between up and down, between irises and poo, between the body and the consciousness, the witness that is within the body. And every part of that link, every piece of the puzzle, including the delusion of ideas, including the thoughts that we are told that we are not, is necessary to put the puzzle back together again. And there is a direction towards awareness of being more integrated, more whole, right? And sometimes, as a temporary measure, it may be useful. There is a part for people to say you are not your body, even though, where do all the bodies go that everyone is not, right? What are they doing, right? Reality is perfect. You just have to delete all matter, Matter is part of the possibility field. You cannot have a complete possibility field without every possibility having space within the possibility field. In other words, the entire mathematical formula, it's like a sweater, right? You create black over here and white over here. You create an infinite continuum of gray or color, depending on how you refract it, between them, right? You can't go halfway along from red to green and skip yellow, just delete it, and then without yellow make the rest of it. It doesn't make any sense. Every point of the gradient supports every other point of the gradient. Structurally speaking, you can't have a chain link with a cut in the chain here that doesn't weaken the chain. If you start deleting possibilities from the possibility field, you're cutting out links in the chain, and eventually it collapses. In the extreme, if you delete one possibility from a possibility field, the entire possibility field collapses mathematically. Right? If you delete one section of a bicycle wheel, the whole wheel collapses. Right? The integration of one part of the circle is held by the distinctions, the illusionary distinctions in the other part of the circle. Black is supported by white. Heat is supported by cold. And every variant in between is a necessary thread to connect one thing to every other thing, to connect us with all that we are and all that is. Be interested in your thoughts and the comment areas below.